The day was quiet, too quiet for Daniel Hayes. The kind of quiet that made your ears ring and your heart uneasy. The sun was soft over Washington, D.C., and the wind brushed gently against the polished surface of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Tourists moved slowly, whispering, their hands tracing names carved into the black stone. It was supposed to be a day of remembrance, but for Daniel, it was the day everything he thought he knew about his life began to break apart. He stood there, staring at the endless wall of names, his reflection blending with the thousands of soldiers who never came home. His fingers stopped when he reached a spot on the wall that made his heart skip a beat. There it was, his name. Hayes Daniel R. The same initials. The same middle name. The same year of death marked beneath it. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone else. Maybe coincidence. But deep inside, something twisted, something old, something buried under years of nightmares and unanswered questions. He hadn't been to this place since he came back from the war. He avoided memorials, parades, even reunions. But now, standing here, staring at his own name carved in stone, he felt like the past had just reached out its cold hand and touched his shoulder. He took a step back, his pulse racing. His breathing quickened. The memory of jungle heat flashed in his mind, the gunfire, the smell of smoke, the faces of men he had lost. He had been there when the helicopter went down. He had been there when they thought he was dead. He had survived. So how could his name be on the wall? An old woman beside him whispered a prayer, unaware of his confusion. She was tracing her son's name, tears falling quietly. Daniel wanted to ask her if she could see it too, his name, the one that wasn't supposed to be there, but he didn't. He felt like if he spoke, the illusion might shatter or worse, become real. He stepped closer again, trembling fingers touching the carved letters. Cold stone. Real. He could feel the groove of his name under his skin. He whispered it aloud, testing reality. Hayes Daniel R. His voice cracked on the R. A memory jolted through him, someone calling his name in the jungle, a medic shouting over the gunfire. Hayes! Stay with me! His heart pounded harder. The noise around him faded. The wall, the people, even the city seemed to dissolve. For a second, he could almost smell the jungle again. Wet earth. Gunpowder. Blood. Then a bright flash, he was back in Vietnam. The heat pressed against his face. He was lying on the ground, his body broken. He remembered trying to move, trying to call for help, but the words never came. He blinked, and the vision was gone. He was back in front of the wall, sweat running down his neck despite the cool October air. He wiped his face with a trembling hand. Maybe it was just a cruel coincidence. Maybe someone else named Daniel Hayes had died that day. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. He turned away, his mind spinning. He'd left the war behind, or at least he thought he had. For years he tried to build a normal life. A small house outside Denver, a job that didn't ask too many questions, a quiet existence surrounded by silence. But the ghosts never left him. They followed him into sleep, whispering through his dreams. As he walked away from the wall, he noticed a man watching him from a distance. Older, maybe late 60s, wearing a faded army jacket with the same unit patch Daniel once wore. The man nodded slowly, like he knew him. Daniel froze. He didn't recognize the face, but something in the eyes felt familiar, too familiar. When Daniel blinked, the man was gone. The spot where he stood was empty. He felt the ground tilt beneath him, a wave of dizziness rushing over. He leaned against a bench, breathing hard. Get it together, he whispered to himself. But inside, a voice whispered back, soft and haunting, you shouldn't be here, Daniel. You were never supposed to come back. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The wall haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again, the name, his name, etched in darkness. And the face of the man in the army jacket, appearing and disappearing like smoke. He poured himself a drink, then another, but the unease stayed. By midnight, he sat alone on his porch, staring into the cold Colorado sky. The war had taken everything from him once, but this was different. This felt like it was trying to take him again. He thought of the faces of his squad, Johnson, Reed, Morales, all gone now. Maybe it was time he found out why his name was carved on that wall. Maybe it was time to stop running. He grabbed the old box under his bed, a box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were photos, letters, and a rusted dog tag. His. The chain was broken, the edges worn. He held it up to the light, his reflection bending in the metal. Then he saw it, another dog tag beneath it, one that didn't belong to him. It was from another soldier. The name was scratched, almost unreadable, but he could make out one thing clearly: Hayes, Dr. He froze. Another Daniel Hayes. The same initials. The same unit. A chill ran through him as he realized something. The man at the wall, the one who vanished, might not have been alive at all. Daniel leaned back, the night pressing close around him. He whispered to himself, half in disbelief, half in fear. If he's gone, then whose name did they put on that wall? The question echoed in his mind like the sound of distant gunfire, and he knew sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow, he would begin digging for answers. But deep down, a darker thought stirred: what if the truth wasn't meant to be found? The next morning came gray and heavy, the kind of morning that carried silence like a weight. Daniel Hayes hadn't slept. He stared at the box of memories on his kitchen table, letters yellowed with time, photographs faded around the edges, dog tags resting in the middle like relics of another life. He took a slow breath, touched the broken chain, and felt the old ache of loss settle deep in his chest. He had buried that life once. Buried it so deep that no one, not even he, dared to dig it up again. But now, his name on the wall had changed everything. There was no going back to pretending. Something about it was wrong, too precise, too deliberate. Someone had written his death into history. Someone had erased him from the living. Daniel opened one of the letters. It was dated 1969, written by Sergeant Reed, his closest friend, the man who saved him more than once in the jungle. Reed had written, "If anything happens to me, promise me you'll go home. Live a real life. Don't let the ghosts win." Daniel had promised. He thought he had kept that promise. But the ghosts never stopped calling. He decided to start with the one place that might still have the answers: the records department at Fort Bragg. It had been years since he'd stepped onto a military base, but he still remembered the smell of diesel, the echo of boots on concrete, the distant hum of helicopters. When he arrived, he could almost feel the ghosts walking beside him. The clerk behind the counter looked no older than 20. She smiled politely when Daniel asked about personnel records. "Vietnam era?" she asked, typing into her computer. "That's going to take a while, sir. Most of those files are archived." He nodded. "Take your time." She paused, reading the screen. "Can I have the full name and date of service?" "Hayes Daniel R.," he said quietly. "Served with the 173rd Airborne, 1968 to 1971. She typed again, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. That record shows as deceased. Kia, killed in action, 1969. Daniel froze. "That can't be right." She looked up, uneasy now. "That's what it says here. Listed missing after an ambush near Pleiku. Declared Kia 2 weeks later." "You said you're Daniel Hayes?" He nodded slowly. Her hands hesitated over the keyboard. "That's not possible. The system lists you as buried at Arlington National Cemetery." A cold wave rushed through him. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. "Can I see the file?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'm not authorized, sir. But if you contact the National Archives, they might release a copy for family members." He almost laughed. "Family members?" he muttered under his breath. "Guess I'll have to pretend to be my own brother." When he walked out of the office, the wind hit his face like ice. He leaned against the railing, breathing hard. Someone had filed him as dead. Someone had closed his story decades ago. But why? And who had signed off on it? He thought about Reed again, about the last mission they had gone on together. He remembered flashes, smoke, screaming, the sound of the helicopter blades. Then darkness. When he woke up in a field hospital, he was told the rest of his unit was gone. They said he was lucky. But now he wondered if luck had anything to do with it. That night, Daniel dug through his old photos again. In one of them, his unit stood in front of a burn-up building, all smiling, all so young. He traced his finger across the faces until he stopped on one. Private First Class David R. Hayes. The same last name. Same initials. He joined their unit only a few weeks before the ambush. Quiet kid. From Ohio, if Daniel remembered right. His breath caught. That was the name on the extra dog tag in his box. Dr. Hayes. It hit him like a storm. The confusion at the medevac site, the chaos, the burned bodies, the broken tags. Could it be that the records had mixed them up? That he had lived, and the other Hayes had died in his place? But if that were true, why had no one ever corrected it? Why was his name still carved into stone, and the other man's erased from history? He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. The line rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. Yeah? Tom? Daniel asked. There was a long pause. Then a low, wary tone. Who's this? It's Hayes. Daniel Hayes. Silence. Then a shaky laugh. That's not funny, man. Hayes is dead. I'm not, Daniel said quietly. I need to talk to you. It's important. Tom's voice was small when he spoke again. Where the hell have you been all these years? Daniel exhaled. Trying to forget. They met 2 days later in a diner off the highway. Tom looked older, heavier, his hair gone gray. But the eyes were the same, eyes that had seen too much and carried too much. When he saw Daniel walk in, his coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Jesus Christ, Tom whispered. You're real. Daniel sat across from him. I saw my name on the wall, Tom. They think I'm dead. Tom rubbed his face, trembling. You were dead, Dan. We saw the body. They showed us your tag. My tag? Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out the rusted chain. You mean this one? Tom stared at it, then at Daniel. That's impossible. Daniel leaned forward. Tell me what happened that day. Tom hesitated. You don't want to dig that up. I have to, Daniel said softly. Because if I'm supposed to be dead, then someone wanted it that way. Tom's face went pale. You really don't remember, do you? Pieces, Daniel said. Bits and flashes. Help me fill in the rest. Tom sighed and looked away. That mission wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't even on record. We were sent in to pull out a downed pilot near the border. But command gave us the wrong coordinates. We walked into an ambush. He paused. When it was over, we had 3 dead. Reed, Morales, and Hayes. The kid. We couldn't tell who was who. Everything was burned. They found your tag on one of the bodies. They said it was you. Daniel's chest tightened. And no one questioned it? Tom shook his head. You were gone. Reed was gone. They just closed the file. Daniel stared down at his hands. Then whose name should have been on that wall? Tom didn't answer. His eyes were full of something Daniel hadn't seen since the war, fear. After a long silence, Tom whispered, There's something you need to know. The mission wasn't just about the pilot. There was a classified package we were carrying. Reed told me never to talk about it. But maybe it's time someone did. Daniel looked up. What kind of package? Tom's hand trembled around his coffee mug. The kind that people would kill to keep buried. Tom's voice trembled as he looked down at his coffee. You remember how Reed always said we were on rescue detail? That was the story they told us. But that wasn't the real reason we were sent there. Daniel leaned forward, his heart pounding. Then what was? Tom took a deep breath, as if he was dragging words up from deep inside him. That mission wasn't a rescue. We were carrying something. Reed had orders to pick up a sealed package from the wreckage. He didn't say what it was, but he kept it close. Said it was from Intel Command. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the way he guarded it. I knew it wasn't normal. Daniel frowned. You're saying it was secret intel? Tom nodded. Maybe. Or something worse. After the ambush, I saw Reed lying there with the package beside him. I tried to grab it, but it was already soaked through. He told me to run. Said don't let them find it. I never knew who they were. Daniel's fingers tightened around his cup. And you think that's connected to me being declared dead? Tom's eyes met his. You were the only survivor from that hill. You were airlifted out. But when we tried to find you later, they told us your body had been identified and buried. It didn't make sense then, and it sure as hell doesn't now. Daniel sat back, his thoughts spinning. Someone wanted me gone. Someone wanted my name erased. Tom nodded slowly. Or protected. Protected? Tom hesitated. Maybe you saw something you weren't supposed to. Maybe someone up top decided the safest thing was to make you disappear. Daniel's chest tightened. I didn't ask to disappear. Tom gave a tired smile. None of us did, brother. For a moment neither spoke. The diner was quiet except for the soft hum of the old ceiling fan. Then Daniel asked, Do you still have contact with anyone from the unit? Tom shook his head. Most of them are gone. But there's one guy who might help. Corporal Harris. He stayed close to the paperwork. After he got out, he worked for a private security contractor that did cleanup jobs for the military, classified record stuff. If anyone knows where your file went, it's him. Daniel took a deep breath. Where is he now? Tom scribbled an address on a napkin. Last I heard, he runs a repair shop outside Fayetteville. He doesn't talk much about the past, but if he sees you alive, that might open something. Daniel looked at the napkin, then back at Tom. Thank you? Tom reached across the table, gripping Daniel's arm. You sure you want to do this? Some doors shouldn't be opened. Daniel looked out the window at the rain falling softly on the road. My name's already carved in stone, Tom. What else can they take from me? That night, Daniel drove for hours. The road wound through pine forests and old farmland, the radio silent, his thoughts loud. He kept seeing his name etched on that wall, his name among the dead. It wasn't just a mistake anymore. It felt like a message. A warning from somewhere buried deep in the past. When he reached the small town, he found the repair shop on the edge of a dirt road. The sign was faded, the windows dark. He knocked on the metal door until a voice answered from inside. Closed. Harris? Daniel called. It's Hayes. Daniel Hayes. There was a pause, then the sound of locks turning. The door opened a crack, and a thin man with sunken eyes stared out. That's not funny, Harris said. Hayes is dead. Daniel gave a faint smile. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Harris studied his face for a long time before opening the door wider. Well, I'll be damned. You really are him. Daniel stepped inside. The shop smelled of oil and old metal. Tools lined the walls, and a single bulb cast long shadows. Harris looked like a man who had seen too much and slept too little. You shouldn't have come here, he muttered. Daniel frowned. Why not? Because you're not supposed to exist, Harris said. Your file, your record, it's flagged. Top clearance. When they marked you dead, they didn't just close your case. They sealed it under a security order. Daniel felt a chill. Why? Harris hesitated. There was talk back then that the package Reed carried wasn't intelligence, it was evidence. Something from inside command. Something that could expose people. When that mission went wrong, they buried everything. The records, the names, the truth. And me, Daniel said quietly. Harris nodded. They buried you too. Daniel's pulse quickened. So I'm living under a lie. You're living under someone else's protection, Harris said. And whoever put your name on that wall, they wanted to make sure you never came looking for answers. Daniel stepped closer. Do you still have access to those files? Harris looked away. Not officially. But there's a backup archive, a physical one, in DC old military correspondence. If your name's in there, it'll be in the classified casualty reports. Daniel's voice hardened. Then I'm going to DC. Harris's eyes widened. You can't just walk in there, Hayes. Those files are guarded for a reason. You start digging, and they'll know. Daniel nodded slowly. Then they'll know I'm alive. For a moment, Harris looked at him like he was staring at a ghost. Then he said, If you're serious, there's someone you'll need to meet first. A woman named Laura Green. She works in historical archives. She's been trying to uncover missing files from Vietnam. If anyone can help you get in, it's her. Daniel took the name down carefully. Thank you. Harris sighed. I hope you find what you're looking for, Hayes. But sometimes the truth isn't a blessing. Sometimes it's just another battlefield. Daniel nodded. I fought worse. When he stepped back into the night, the air was cool, filled with the scent of rain and rust. He looked up at the stars, scattered like faint memories across the dark sky. Somewhere out there, the truth waited. Buried under years of silence, sealed behind locked doors, carved in stone beside his name. And for the first time in decades, Daniel Hayes was ready to fight again, this time, not for survival, but for his story. Daniel found Laura Green 2 days later. She worked at a small research office near Washington, surrounded by stacks of old military reports and yellowed photographs. When he walked in, she looked up from her desk with curious eyes, the kind that studied people before trusting them. You must be Daniel Hayes, she said softly. Harris called. Said you'd show up with a story that sounds impossible? Daniel smiled faintly. Most of my life feels that way. Laura gestured to a chair. I looked into what he told me. You're not the first soldier whose file doesn't match the official record, but yours, it's strange. The date of death matches the ambush near Pleiku. The documents list your name, your unit, and even a burial confirmation. But the medical records from that same week show a soldier matching your description admitted to a field hospital. No name, just unknown male, 173rd Airborne. Daniel's heart quickened. That was me. I thought so, Laura said. But here's the thing, someone signed that medical report, and that signature is blacked out. Like it was meant to disappear. Daniel leaned forward. Can you trace it? I can try, she said. But the only way to access the original document is to go to the National Archives vault. The physical file might still exist. If it does, it'll have the real signature and the original casualty list. He nodded. Then that's where we go. Laura studied him carefully. You realize that going after sealed military records without permission is dangerous. They don't just file these things away for no reason. People lost their careers trying to unseal less than this. Daniel's voice was steady. I've already lost my name. What more can they take? Laura smiled sadly. Then I guess we're doing this. Over the next few days, they planned. Laura filed a formal request for access, listing Daniel as a historical verification subject. While they waited for approval, she showed him photos and reports from his unit, most of them marked classified. Each image pulled him back to places he had tried to forget. He saw Reed smiling beside a campfire. Morales cleaning his rifle. The kid, Private Dr. Hayes, writing a letter home. Every face felt like a ghost staring out from paper. Do you ever wonder why some stories get remembered and others disappear? Laura asked one evening. Daniel nodded. Because some people decide which ones deserve to live. Her eyes softened. Maybe this is your way of giving one back. 3 days later, Laura received a coded email. We got approval, she said, her voice shaking slightly. But only for viewing, not for copies. They'll have a security officer in the room. We can't take pictures or notes. That's fine, Daniel said. I just need to see it. When they entered the archives building, the air felt cold and still, like time itself was frozen in the walls. The security officer led them to a small room and placed a thick folder on the table. The words, "Classified Casualty Files, 173rd Airborne," were stamped across the cover in faded ink. Laura opened it slowly. Inside were old typewritten reports, medical tags, and confirmation letters. She flipped through until she found one marked Mission Code, Ravenfall. Daniel frowned. Ravenfall. That's what Reed called it. She scanned the page, then stopped. Here, she whispered. Patient log, March 17, 1969. Male, 28, sustained shrapnel wounds, severe concussion. Identity uncertain. Dog tag number D173R61. Daniel's hand trembled. That's mine. Laura flipped the page. Signed by Field Medic, Captain S. Collins. Daniel froze. The name hit him like a hammer. Collins. He wasn't just a medic. He was command intel. Reed never trusted him. Laura turned another page. There was a second report dated a week later. Patient deceased. File transferred to HQ Casualty Division. But under that report, someone had scrawled in pen. Confirmed recovery, relocation pending. Laura looked up. That's two opposite entries. One says you died. The other says you were relocated. Daniel took a deep breath. They didn't misidentify me. They moved me. Laura frowned. Why would they do that? Because I saw something, Daniel said quietly. Something I wasn't supposed to. He closed his eyes, and the memories began to return. The last moments of the ambush. The smell of fire, the shouting, Reed's voice yelling something he couldn't hear. He remembered crawling toward Reed's body, the briefcase beside him. He remembered seeing a flash of papers, names, coordinates, maybe photos. Then a hand grabbed his arm, and everything went black. When he woke up in the field hospital, he couldn't move. A man stood over him, face blurred by light. You were never here, the man said. Do you understand? Then darkness again. Daniel opened his eyes, trembling. It wasn't an accident. They faked my death because I saw what was in that case. Laura whispered. What was it? I don't know, he said. But Reed died to protect it. She turned one more page in the file, and stopped. Inside was a photo of the case, labeled Recovered Evidence, Operation Ravenfall, sealed by order of Colonel Nathan Reed. Daniel's breath caught. Reed sealed it? Laura looked confused. But Reed was your sergeant. How could he also be? Daniel's voice was soft. Unless he wasn't just a sergeant. Unless he was working undercover for Intel Command, Laura whispered. And if he was? Daniel's eyes darkened. Then the whole mission was built on a lie. And the men who died weren't casualties. They were cover-ups. He stood, pushing the chair back slowly. I need to find the rest of that case. And I need to know who gave the order to bury me. Laura looked at him with quiet determination. Then we're not done yet. As they left the archives, Daniel glanced once more at the folder left on the table. The word, deceased, still sat beside his name, stamped in red ink. For everyone else, he was gone. But as he walked through the cold hall, his steps echoed like defiance. He had survived the war. Now he was going to survive the truth. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The folder's images replayed in his mind like a film stuck on loop. Reed's name. The blacked-out signature. The red stamp that declared him dead. He sat by the window of his motel room, watching rain slide down the glass. Each drop carried fragments of memory, faces, laughter, loss. He whispered to the dark. Why did you do it, Reed? Why bury me alive? Laura's voice came from behind him. You haven't stopped thinking about him, have you? Daniel didn't turn. He was my brother. My commander. I trusted him more than anyone. And now you think he lied? Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't know what to think anymore. Laura sat on the edge of the bed. I ran a trace on that signature, the one blacked out on your medical report. You were right. It wasn't random. The code pattern matches Reed's authorization ID. He turned slowly. Reed signed it? Yes. He ordered your file sealed. But there's something else. I found a message buried in the metadata. It's a sequence of letters, R27X Falcon. Daniel frowned. Falcon. He stared into the distance. That was our call sign. Reed always said Falcon never falls. Laura leaned forward. Maybe it's not just a phrase. Maybe it's a location or project code. He grabbed a pen and scribbled the code on a napkin. R27X. That's an old military coordinate format. If it's a reference, we can find it. After a few hours of digging, Laura found a match. There, she said. R27X lines up with an abandoned training site in Virginia. It used to belong to the Army Research Division. The base was shut down in the late 80s, classified operations only. Daniel looked at her. That's where he hid it. Daniel, she said cautiously, if Reed sealed your file to protect you, breaking that seal might undo everything he died for. He looked down at the napkin, his name written beside the code. Maybe. But I can't live as a ghost anymore. They reached the site the next morning. The place was buried under weeds and rust. Faded signs read, "Authorized personnel only." The wind carried the scent of damp metal and old memories. Laura checked her tablet. The storage records say one vault still has power. Sublevel 3. They found a narrow stairway leading underground. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. When they reached the bottom, Daniel saw a steel door marked with a faded emblem, a falcon's wing. Falcon never falls, he whispered. The keypad was dead, but Laura rigged a small battery to it. The lights flickered, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a room filled with old crates, film reels, and file cabinets sealed in dust. On the far wall hung a single photograph, Reed, standing with a group of men Daniel didn't recognize. At the bottom of the photo, a label read, Project Falcon, 1969 Intelligence Division. Laura scanned the shelves until she found a black case, similar to the one Daniel remembered from that day. Its tag read, Recovered Evidence, Operation Ravenfall. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were several documents and a small metal recorder. She pressed play. A crackling voice filled the air. If you're hearing this, it means the truth survived longer than I did. Daniel froze. It was Reed. I know what they'll tell you. Reed's voice continued. That our mission failed. That we were ambushed by chance. But that's a lie. Ravenfall wasn't a rescue op, it was an extraction. We were sent to remove evidence of illegal experiments, not enemy intel. When we found it, Command panicked. They couldn't risk exposure, so they erased everything, including us. Daniel's chest tightened. I signed your death, Daniel, Reed's voice said. Because if they thought you were alive, they'd hunt you down like the rest of us. You were the only one I could save. Reed paused, his voice breaking slightly. If you ever find this, know that I didn't betray you. I buried you to protect you. But if you want to finish what we started, find the list in this case. It has the names of every man who signed the order. End it, Daniel. End what they began. The recording clicked off. Laura looked at him. Daniel, are you okay? He stared at the recorder, eyes filled with something between rage and sorrow. He saved me, but he also made me disappear. She whispered. So what now? He took the list from the case. There were 5 names. All officers. One of them still alive, a retired colonel named Nathaniel Briggs. Daniel folded the paper. We start with him. As they left the vault, Laura looked back at the photo of Reed. The light caught the corner of the frame, revealing faint writing beneath the dust. It said, For the ones the world forgot. Outside, the storm had cleared. The sky was wide and open, painted with early light. Daniel breathed deeply, his heartbeat steady. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking away from the past. He was walking toward it. 3 days later, Daniel found himself driving through a quiet countryside road in Virginia. The world outside seemed peaceful, but inside his mind, everything was chaos. Each mile he drove brought him closer to the man who held the answers, Colonel Nathaniel Briggs. Laura sat beside him, studying the old list Reed had left. Briggs retired 20 years ago. No public appearances since then. He lives on a farm far from everyone. Daniel nodded slowly. That's exactly where I'd hide too. When they reached the farmhouse, the sun was setting behind the hills. The place looked ordinary: wooden fence, rocking chair, smoke from a chimney. But Daniel could feel something off. Soldiers learn to sense danger long before it shows its face. He got out of the car, walked up to the porch, and knocked. A moment later, the door opened. An old man stood there, his back straight despite the years. His gray eyes studied Daniel carefully, then narrowed. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel's heart pounded. "You know who I am?" Briggs sighed, glancing past Daniel to the empty road. "I knew you'd come eventually." "You look just like your file said, only older, more stubborn." Daniel stepped forward. "Reed told me the truth. About Ravenfall. About the experiments. About how you erased us." Briggs didn't deny it. He always talked too much. "Why did you do it?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Why fake our deaths? Why sign my name onto a wall full of men I fought beside?" The old colonel's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Because the war ended, son. And the lies we told couldn't survive peace." Daniel clenched his fists. "That's not an answer." Briggs walked slowly to the porch railing. Ravenfall wasn't just about intelligence recovery. It was a cover. The army wanted to test a new kind of psychological endurance, how far a soldier's mind could go before it broke. You were one of the test groups, Daniel. Not a volunteer, but a subject. Daniel froze. "What are you saying?" Briggs turned toward him, his voice heavy. "You were chosen because of your record, loyal, obedient, steady under fire. They put you and your team into an unwinnable situation. The ambush, the chaos, it was staged. They wanted to see how you'd react under hopeless conditions." Daniel felt the world tilt. "You used us?" "We didn't know the price," Briggs said quietly. "When things went wrong, when Reed disobeyed orders and tried to pull you out, they called it treason. I was told to erase the unit, bury every trace. Reed begged me to spare one. He chose you." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "So he signed my death." Briggs nodded. "To keep you alive." The silence that followed was unbearable. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees, soft and haunting. Laura broke it first. "You're telling me the government tested its own soldiers, then buried the evidence?" Briggs looked at her with tired eyes. "That's what war does to men, miss. It turns them into ghosts, long before they die." Daniel's anger boiled. "And you just lived with it? You let us rot while you retired to a quiet farm?" Briggs didn't flinch. "I carried it every day. Don't mistake my silence for peace." Daniel took a step closer. "Where are the records? The real ones? The ones that prove what you did?" Briggs hesitated, then pointed toward the barn. "Under the floorboards. You'll find a metal box. Everything's in there, reports, signatures, names. If you open it, the world will know. But you'll also destroy every man still living who had a hand in this, including me." Daniel stared at him. "You're asking me to protect the men who buried me?" "I'm asking you to decide what kind of man you want to be," Briggs said softly. "A soldier or a survivor?" The words hung in the air like a test of faith. Daniel turned and walked toward the barn without answering. Laura followed quietly. Inside, the air smelled of hay and dust. He found the loose board Briggs mentioned and pried it open. Beneath it lay a small steel case, locked but brittle with age. Laura whispered, "This is it. The proof." Daniel ran his hand over the lid, feeling the rough metal beneath his fingers. "This is the truth they buried with my name." He broke the lock with a crowbar and opened the case. Inside were documents stamped classified, yellowed photos of soldiers, including himself, and a reel of tape labeled Ravenfall Test Subject 17, read. Laura picked up the reel. They recorded everything. Daniel's chest tightened. They wanted to see how far I'd go before breaking. He sank to his knees, the weight of it all pressing down. Reed tried to save me from this, from knowing. Laura knelt beside him. He saved you from being their experiment forever. But now you have a choice. You can keep hiding, or you can finish what he started. Daniel stared at the tape in her hands. The flickering light from the barn's window made it look almost alive. If I release this, I burn everything that's left of my past. Maybe that's the only way to live again, she said softly. He looked toward the farmhouse. Briggs was still standing on the porch, staring into the distance like a man waiting for judgment. Daniel closed the case and stood up. He's right about one thing. I have to decide what kind of man I want to be. Laura asked. And who is that? He looked at her, his voice steady. Not a ghost. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance as Daniel carried the box to the car. Each step felt like he was walking through years of silence, each heartbeat echoing the words carved into that memorial wall, for the ones the world forgot. When he opened the car door, Laura asked quietly, Where do we go now? He looked ahead at the road disappearing into darkness. Washington. If I'm going to bring this truth to light, I'm going to do it where they can't ignore it. She smiled faintly. Then let's finish what he started. As the car rolled away from the farmhouse, the rain began to fall again, soft, steady, cleansing. Behind them, Briggs stood on the porch, watching the taillights fade into the distance. He whispered to the storm, God help him. God help us all. The next morning, Washington lay under a pale, overcast sky. The streets were busy, but Daniel felt strangely invisible among the crowds. Each face passed him by without a glance, and he wondered how many of them had ever stopped to think about the names carved into those cold memorial walls just a few miles away. He and Laura sat parked near the old Federal Archive building, watching people go in and out. The case with the documents sat between them like a sleeping beast, quiet but full of danger. Laura finally spoke. Once we go in there, there's no turning back. Are you sure you want to do this? Daniel stared ahead. My name's already carved in stone. What more can they take from me? They stepped out of the car and walked through the heavy glass doors. Inside, the air was cold, heavy with the smell of paper and time. Rows of files, sealed reports, and forgotten truths surrounded them. They met a young clerk at the front desk. Laura introduced herself as a journalist, showing her credentials. We have evidence connected to a declassified operation called Ravenfall, she said, keeping her voice steady. The clerk frowned. That's not in our system anymore. That project was buried decades ago. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Then maybe it's time someone unburied it. The man hesitated, then motioned them toward a side office. Wait here, he said quietly. As soon as the door closed, Laura turned to Daniel. You think he'll call someone? Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the case. I'm counting on it. Within minutes, 2 men in suits entered the room. They didn't introduce themselves, but Daniel recognized the look, the kind of men who spoke for people that never showed their faces. One of them sat across the table. Mr. Carter, he began, using Daniel's old name like it still belonged to the government. We've been told you're in possession of classified material. Daniel didn't blink. You mean evidence? The man smiled faintly. That depends on how you look at it. Sometimes what we call the truth can do more damage than lies ever could. Laura placed the metal box on the table. You erased him from history, she said. You turned him into a ghost. He's not staying silent anymore. The second man spoke for the first time. You have no idea what you're playing with. That project was buried to protect the country. Daniel's voice was calm but cold. I fought for this country. I bled for it. The least it can do is let me exist. The first man leaned forward. You were declared dead for a reason. Bringing this back, publishing this, would tear open things better left closed. Men higher than me will make sure that box disappears. Laura reached for the case, but Daniel stopped her. His gaze never left the man's face. Then you'd better tell them to come fast. There was a long silence. One of the agents finally exhaled and stood. If you walk out that door with that box, you'll never have peace again. Daniel rose to his feet. Peace died with my name. They walked out together. The agents didn't follow. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the distant hum of the city. Laura looked shaken. They won't let this go. Daniel nodded. Neither will I. They didn't go to a newspaper. Instead, they drove straight to the memorial, the wall that started it all. The place was quiet, except for the gentle sound of footsteps and the rustling of flags. Tourists took pictures, veterans stood silently with hands on their hearts. Daniel carried the case in his hand, each step echoing with memories. When they reached the section where his name was carved, he stopped. The polished stone reflected his face, alive and weathered, staring back at the dead version of himself. He knelt slowly, touching the letters with his fingertips. They felt cold, final. But for the first time, he didn't feel like a ghost touching his own grave. Laura stood beside him. You could destroy the file, she whispered. No one would ever know. You could walk away. Daniel shook his head. The world forgot my name once. I won't let it forget the others. He opened the metal case, removed the documents, and spread them gently across the base of the wall. The wind caught the edges, lifting the pages like wings. Laura took out her camera and began to record. Tell me what happened, Daniel, she said softly. He looked straight into the lens, voice low and steady. We were soldiers sent into a lie. We were told we were saving lives, but we were the experiment. The war didn't kill us, the silence did. My name shouldn't be here. But maybe it should stay, as a reminder of what silence costs. His words carried into the air, quiet but heavy, as if even the wind had stopped to listen. A crowd began to gather. Veterans, visitors, strangers. Some recognized the name he touched. Some didn't. But they all felt the weight of his voice. Laura whispered, It's done. It's out there now. They can't erase it again. Daniel stood up, his eyes reflecting both relief and sorrow. Maybe now they'll remember us, not as ghosts, but as men. The camera clicked off. The documents lay scattered at his feet, marked with truth and fingerprints. For the first time in years, Daniel smiled, small, tired, but real. As he turned to leave, a child approached the wall with a small American flag. The boy looked at Daniel and said, Were you in the war? Daniel nodded softly. Yeah. A long time ago. The boy placed the flag beneath Daniel's name. Thank you for what you did. Daniel swallowed hard. No, thank you for remembering. He looked once more at the wall, his name carved among the dead, and whispered, Maybe this is where the living finally come home. The video Laura recorded spread faster than either of them expected. Within a day, news outlets began picking it up, veteran groups, independent journalists, even small-town radio stations. Everyone was talking about the soldier who stood before the wall that already carried his name. At first, the story sounded impossible. A dead man walking among the living. A soldier erased and forgotten, now suddenly real again. But as the evidence surfaced, and as Laura released parts of the documents, the truth became undeniable. The name Daniel Carter started showing up everywhere. Some called him a hero. Others called him a problem. Government spokesmen refused to comment. The military denied involvement. But silence no longer worked the way it used to. The world had already begun to listen. Daniel didn't seek the cameras. He avoided interviews. He didn't want fame, he wanted peace. But peace, he realized, wasn't given, it had to be earned. A week after the video, he returned to the memorial. Alone this time. The morning was cold, mist hanging low over the grass. The walls were damp, the names glistening under the soft light. He carried a folded piece of paper in his pocket, his own letter. The first one he had written in years. As he stood before his name, he took it out and read quietly to himself. To the man I used to be. You were loyal. You were brave. You believed every order had a purpose. You fought for people you'd never meet and died for reasons you never knew. But now you've finally come home. You can rest. I'll take it from here. He folded the letter and tucked it beneath the small flag the boy had left days before. Then he just stood there, breathing, remembering, letting the silence settle. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Laura. She said nothing, just stood beside him, watching the wall. They want me to testify, he said after a while. There's going to be a hearing about Ravenfall. Laura nodded. Will you do it? He smiled faintly. I already did. The truth's out. That's enough. She looked at him for a long moment. You could disappear, you know. Start over. No one would blame you. He shook his head. Disappearing is easy. Living, that's harder. They walked together toward a bench facing the reflecting pool. A small group of people had gathered nearby, whispering quietly as they recognized him. He didn't turn to look. For once, he didn't feel like a ghost walking among them. He sat down and stared at the water. The surface was smooth, reflecting the wall behind him. The same reflection that once made him question who he was now gave him an answer. He was still that soldier, flawed, scarred, but alive. And he was ready to stop running. Days turned into weeks. The hearings began. Documents surfaced. Names were called. The operation that had erased him became one of the most talked about military scandals in years. But through it all, Daniel kept silent. His story was already told. It didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been forgotten. Sometimes he'd get letters from people, families of lost soldiers, men who served in secret missions, widows who never received answers. They wrote things like, "Thank you for reminding us they were real." He read every one of them. And sometimes, when he felt the weight of it all pressing down, he'd return to that wall. One evening, months later, he came back alone again. The sun was setting, and the marble glowed gold. The air was calm. He walked along the rows of names, touching each one gently as if greeting old friends. When he reached his own, he smiled softly. The boy's flag was gone now, replaced by a fresh one. Someone still remembered. He placed his hand on the cold stone. "You were never supposed to be here," he whispered. "But maybe you were meant to be found." He stood for a moment longer, then turned to leave. The sound of distant traffic faded into the hum of the evening. As he walked away, a group of tourists stopped nearby, reading the names aloud. One of them pointed at his and said, "That's the soldier who came back. The one who wasn't supposed to exist." Daniel paused but didn't turn around. He smiled quietly. Because for the first time, that didn't sound like a curse, it sounded like a second chance. As the last light of day touched the wall, the reflection shimmered one final time. For a heartbeat, it looked as though two versions of Daniel stood side by side, the one who died, and the one who lived to tell the story. And then, with a deep breath, he walked into the fading light. The narrator's voice softened like a closing memory. Sometimes, war doesn't end when the guns go silent. Sometimes, it ends when the forgotten finally speak. And when a soldier sees his own name carved among the fallen, maybe it isn't a mistake. Maybe it's a reminder that some lives aren't meant to be erased. A pause. If you found your name among the lost, would you have the courage to claim it back? The story faded into quiet. The wall stood still, silent, eternal, waiting for the next forgotten name to be remembered. And in that silence, Daniel Carter's story finally came home.